Hey guys, it's Merce. Welcome back to Harpies in the Trees, where I review horror books with a supernatural focus. Today I'm going to be reviewing two horror books that feature creepy ass apartments. Really creepy ones. That's Audrey's Door by Sarah Langan and The Apartment by S.L. Gray. One of the things I decided to do when reading these two books was I decided to read them together. So I read 20 pages of Audrey's Door and then 20 pages of The Apartment. And I would just switch back and forth like that. And I did that and it was actually pretty awesome and I really did like it and enjoyed it. It does help that the books were good and I was invested. It was nice. I thought maybe I would get confused about going back and forth or something, but actually I really enjoyed it and I think I'm gonna do that again. Hopefully you guys saw the last video I did. It was my very first dark arts and crafts video that I will be doing not that often, probably like 4 times a year I think, but just something where it's DIY craft stuff that has a book relationship to it. So for the book at DIY Sigil, it was taking the name of the book and turning it into a seal, an archaic logo of sorts, things that you could use for a multitude of creative and magical applications if you like. So you should definitely check that out. I was really excited. Adam Neville actually tweeted about my video because I did use one of his books in my sigil making DIY, so that was really awesome. It's really cool when like your favorite authors take an interest or, you know, watch the things that you do. It's it was really cool and it made my day, so I had to share that. The apartment begins with The apartment starts with a dinner party that we are just sort of dropped into at the tail end of it. And it's Mark and Steph who are married, and Mark's best friend, Carla, and her boyfriend. And they're having this discussion about how they should go somewhere for vacation. This discussion is sort of edgy for Mark and for Stephanie because they just been through a home invasion. And this home invasion was really difficult for them, not just because of the trauma and the PTSD, but also like what it's done to their relationship, how they see each other, how they feel in their own home. They're just not at ease. They can't relax. They don't feel safe. And they also have their own issues. Like Mark feels very emasculated by this home invasion. And Stephanie, you know, she sort of holds some resentments against him for how things kind of played out. So obviously this couple is on edge, and so Carla's like, you guys gotta go on a vacation, just get away, go somewhere, go anywhere, go to Greece, go to the US, go to Paris. And it's at this mention of Paris that Stephanie just like lights up. She just has all of these really romantic ideas about Paris. She's always wanted to go, and this really plants a seed inside of her. Mark, on the other hand, is like, you know, we can't afford this. Carla's boyfriend interjects and he's like, you know, you could actually do one of those house swaps where you sign up online, you find a house that's in the place that you want to go, and you know, you and this couple swap. So they come to your house and you go to theirs and you don't have to pay for any accommodations. Stephanie really likes this idea, but Mark is not really that impressed and he's sort of indifferent. But the next day, Stephanie signs up for one of these house swapping sites. And she posts pictures of their house and where, you know, the country they live in, and are looking for a couple that are in Paris. And it doesn't take too long before she gets a response. And this is when things really begin to take off. So if you're planning on going on a vacation anytime soon, I don't think you should read this. This is really not going to put you in a very positive mindset when you go. This is one of those books that kind of plays off the fears that we all have when we go on vacation somewhere, you know, that something's going to go wrong. The Apartment is really good. It's chilling, it's creepy, it's supernatural. It focuses in on this couple that are having issues. You know, they've already been through the ringer with a home invasion, and then when they go on into this vacation that's supposed to be, you know, a time where it's just, you know, awesome, amazing French food and beautiful Parisians and the language is so romantic, but instead it turns into a nightmare. So the apartment they get in France is not as advertised. It is completely like nothing you would ever want anyone to live in. It's really shocking, like what it is. And in this story, there is a layer of the supernatural, which is really well done. It's not heavy. It's a really light hand, but it works with the story, because what's more interesting is not so much the supernatural part. It's what's more interesting is how it's affecting our main characters. And that's really what gave it its punch, because these characters just feel like real people. I didn't find it to be a slow burn at all, but I do like character-driven stories, and you know, this is definitely, you know, character-driven. All of the chapters are, you know, either Mark and Steph, so we get to be in their heads. Every other chapter, which gives us a lot of insight. It's not tedious though, so if character-driven is not your thing, it's like, you know, don't worry about it. I still think it'll be a really fun read. So some of the like motifs and elements in this book are, yeah, a marriage that's in distress, a home invasion that leaves a home no longer a home. There's the supernatural aspect. There's like the mystery as to why is this happening, and the mystery is definitely something that is actively being sought to be solved in the book, so it's really cool. There's some weird elements, you know, to creep you out, which is cool. And also, you know, most importantly, I think there's like these mundane things that just can be so negative and turn everything that you were planning on its head. And that in itself feels so strong in the book, and you really feel bad for them. S.L. Gray is a combination of two authors. It's Sarah Lotz and Louis Greenberg. And they seem to, I mean, at least to me, they wrote really well together. So I gave this 5 stars because it is a page turner, and because the relationship between Mark and Steph is so well done. I mean, at least I thought so. It was just so well done that I was just really impressed with it. It was just really good. Audrey's door begins with Audrey, who is an architect, and she works in Manhattan, and at the moment she's looking for a place to live. She's living with her boyfriend, who's a filmmaker, but she really wants her own space. So she finds an apartment online. It's in the Upper West Side, but it's also $1,000 a month. Suspiciously cheap. But it is in a very special building, and this is what caught Audrey's eye. This building was built in the style of chaotic naturalism. And it's one of the few buildings that still remains, and this is something that is of great interest to Audrey because she's an architect, she studied it, she knows about it, and she really wants to see it in person. So she heads over to the building and she meets up with the super Edgardo. He takes her up to the 14th floor, and the building itself is already impressive. She's just noticing and seeing all kinds of architectural elements and stuff that, you know, is kind of getting her excited. They get to the apartment and Audrey is taking a look around, and, you know, the apartment, it's really cool and interesting. It does have a hole in the floor and it hasn't been lived in for quite a while, like maybe like 20 years or so. But she's not really deterred. You know, the views are beautiful. The building itself has stained glass in the windows, and there's all of these things that she likes about it. And she's just about to tell Edgardo that she's gonna take the apartment, but he turns to her and he says, "Maybe this apartment isn't for you. I don't know if you heard, but there was a murder in this apartment, and it was the woman who killed 4 of her children in the bathtub, and it's haunted." Audrey starts to rethink this decision of, you know, getting this apartment. She really doesn't want to live in a place where people have died. And she's just about to say that to the super, but he says something that sort of rubs her the wrong way, and she decides to take the apartment. So this story was wild. Very wild. Very weird things happening, spooky things, supernatural things, other dimensional things. There's the chaotic naturalism, which has its own history. So in the book, you know, there are newspaper clippings and stuff like that from the late 1800s to the 1920s or so that talk about this building and you know, what its importance is. There's also a layer of Grey Gardens here. If you've ever seen the Grey Gardens documentary, it is just an insanely interesting documentary on two of these women who are part of the Kennedys and how they lived in this raccoon-infested mansion. And the mansion itself was so deteriorated, they just lived in one room together, and they'd been living like that for like ages. And so they're just like these aristocrats that sort of fell into poverty, but both of them are not really existing in reality. It's very interesting. And we have something like that here because the occupants of the building that Audrey has moved into are these people who come from New York royalty, people like Hearst, people like Reed. So you have these people who have been living in this building, you know, for generations. And they are living also in their own realities, and they're all really, really old. So they, you know, they have this kind of strange absurdity to them, you know, where they're sort of existing in another era in these floors. So that was really cool. I really liked that aspect. I thought it was super creepy and well done. And in the middle of all of this, we have this woman who's an architect, but she also has OCD, and she also comes from a very, very troubled background. She has a very complicated and painful relationship with her mother, who suffers from mental health issues. And Audrey is kind of emotionally stunted in a lot of ways. And the soul of this story is that when Audrey moves in, she is compelled to build a door. It's really interesting, like, how we get to this point, you know, like how the door is being built, why it's being built, what's behind the door, and, you know, why her, you know, and all that stuff is like really interesting because it does have this like Shining-esque quality to it a little bit. And the way that Audrey is compelled to make this door is through dreams and through hallucinations and visions and things like that. So she's being affected like every single moment of the day by this apartment. And the story of the architecture is really important because in New York City, there's a few documentaries about it, but if you walk around New York City, you will find all kinds of really weird, interesting architectural stuff. When I lived in New York, I would just like walk around occasionally. I ran across so many buildings that had really unusual elements. They do look esoteric, they look Greek, they look brutalist. New York is just known for having some of the top architects and having a lot of hidden architecture. Taking like a building in New York and kind of making it into a character was really cool. So I liked this concept because I love New York, and I like that, you know, we talk about the architecture of New York and it's supernatural. For the ending, I think I would have wished for something a little different, but I don't think it was a bad ending or anything. There was one chapter towards the end of the book, as we were careening down to find out, like, you know, what everything is and get all of our answers and stuff. There's this chapter that's just like between this and that, and it's a whole entire chapter that is dedicated to talking about a side character's life. Like, it's a side character. Like, we didn't even barely interacted with her at all, but for some reason we had to have this whole entire chapter. And so I was just kind of like, you know, like slogging through this chapter to get to the end because I was just like, I just want to talk about the door. I don't know why it was there. It didn't make any sense to me. I felt like it wasn't really pertinent to the story. I don't know, maybe I missed something. The other thing was I'd actually picked this up to read it a while ago, actually, because this was actually a recommendation from Jason's Reads. I think I saw him do a review of this, and I was like, oh, that sounds really cool, totally up my alley. But like in the first like 15 pages, like I came across this line where she's like, thinking that when she goes to see the apartment, it's gonna be so tiny. And she says to herself, oh, I'll have to live there with 50 Chinamen. And I was like, oh, okay, is this whole book gonna be like that? Because I really don't wanna, you know, like, that's kind of shitty. I don't wanna read that. And, you know, to be fair, like, through the rest of the book, there really wasn't anything like that at all, ever again. So I'm not really sure why it was there in the first place. You know, those things are definitely a choice when you're writing books. So that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But I think that the book was really good. I think the story was just really unique, you know, taking this aspect. I mean, it's basically making a building in New York into a character, and it worked. It was good. It was really good. So I gave this 4 stars. It's supernatural, it's weird, it's interesting. It brings in the architecture of New York in a really interesting way, and also has a little bit of a Grey Gardens vibe. Oh yeah, and also it's a little Shining-esque. If you like this review, please like and comment below. Let's talk about these books if you've read them, what you thought about them. You know, everyone has a different experience reading books. I don't really, you know, I'm not like an expert or anything, so these are just my amateur thoughts or whatever. So I'm always open to, you know, discussing and talking about them and seeing, like, you know, things I've missed and, you know, what you guys think as well. Thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. Please take care of yourselves, wear a mask, and I will talk to you next time.